What's up guys, my name is Sanju from Build to Made, and today I'm back with a new project.
Last summer I built these duo of tall planters for my mom using old fence boards and a 2x2 frame constructed from 2x4 pressure treated lumber. With spring here, I'm inspired to build a planter box on a slightly smaller scale, something that could be portable, and something that anybody can make without investing in a table saw. With a little bit of patience, I'm here to show you how to use these 5 pickets to make this planter under $10. Let's get started. Now you can go to the store and buy a ready-made cedar planter box, but my most recent search pulled up this $100 planter. Yikes.
And so I started thinking, surely, I can make this for less.
I came across dozens of build plans using 5.5-inch fence boards like the one I used last year, but most of them required an expensive table saw to rip that board down. This makes a lot of sense if you plan to run a production line out of your garage. You get more wood for less and you can do more with it. But with the price of lumber coming down slightly, I started looking at the less popular 3.5-inch fence boards that any beginner could pick up. These are the ones that I grew up with. And the beauty of these boards, it can fit into a $12 miter box where you can make simple cuts using a hand pull miter saw, if that's all you have. I'm actually going to start with a hand saw, progress to a circular saw, and finish with a miter saw to speed things up. Now there are a few supplies needed such as nails, screws, and glue, but because these are bulk items, they tend to spread over several projects. And I do have a few tools that I already own such as a drill and a brad nailer. I know some folks may not have these tools and you can substitute with 1-inch nails and a hammer, so just keep that in mind. In addition, when you go to the hardware store, you might see the picket listed with a width of 4 inches. The actual width of this picket is 3.5 inches. What's listed is the nominal width. It's just easier to say. And these pickets have dog ears that we'll be cutting off, so the actual material being used will be under 6 feet by a hair.
Alrighty, so we got a very simple cut list. 3 different groups of boards to cut at 3 different lengths: long, medium, and short.
Don't worry, I have this cut list saved in the description below. Now I realize there might be some waste, so don't forget to grab an extra board just in case. The miter box is an underrated champ, particularly useful for guiding quick cuts such as trim work. There are many ways to secure the box. I like to place mine on top of the 2x4 and driving down 2-inch screws. Because I have a finished tabletop, I ratchet clamp the 2x4 to the table. Any style clamp will work fine. The ratchet action saves a little bit of time. The fence boards perfectly slide in, but you'll need to raise it with a scrap piece of 3/4-inch plywood so that you get an even stable surface for cutting. Using my tape measure, I marked off the various cut lengths. A builder square or speed square is the perfect tool to slide right under and draw those straight lines. Funny how there's more than one name for a tool. When it's time to cut, carefully use a miter saw. I always have this urge to quickly saw the wood. You'll save some energy by keeping the blade even from the front to the back and naturally allowing the wood to cut without too much force. And of course, things fall off the table if the work surface isn't clear. Luckily, my impact driver can take a beating. There are times that I feel a miter box with a saw results in a perfect cut. Due to the nature of lumber, the edges will always need to be touched up with sandpaper. Let's face it guys, although I aspire to be a minimalist, the wife in my life doesn't allow me to spend countless hours cutting wood. Sorry honey, the rhyme just made a lot of sense. Look, power tools are designed to improve efficiency, and depending on your budget, you can speed up this process with a circular saw or a miter saw. When using the circular saw, I like to clamp down my workpiece to the bench with a speed square. I'm not a pro, but when it comes to these things, anything to help make a straight cut works for me. Remember to account for the plate or shoe and make sure the blade is aligned with the cut line. You'll have to push that speed square over a bit. Adjust the blade height to match the depth of the workpiece and then a little extra. I always forget to do this, but it's always a good idea to remove any staples. Usually you can find the tags at the very end. Circular saw operation is very important. Although I'm not a safety expert, I urge everybody to read up on best practices. I know I'm always learning something new. Okay, so with all of the pieces cut, we can finally begin. I started building this planter one way and later discovered another way. You'll see that here shortly. This box is designed creating 4 identical sides. Each side has 2 short pieces on the top and bottom and 2 long pieces on each side. The 3 medium pieces are laid on top. We want those pieces to be dead center, so we offset 1 inch from the bottom and the depth of the picket on each side. Once everything looks good, use a waterproof wood glue to join each piece. To prevent the wood from moving while the glue sets, I reach for my 16-gauge brad nailer to drive in 1-inch nails. You don't need to use a brad nailer and instead can jump straight to using number 6 1-inch exterior grade screws. There have been times where I've regretted not pre-drilling and adding a countersink, steps that minimize wood split and aesthetically provide a clean look. So I do this now for almost every project. I've added about 1 screw each for the top and bottom and then some. This first side took longer because we were learning, but once you get going, additional sides will go by much quicker. Now things get a little fun. With the offset, 2 sides should fit perfectly. Then add on the 3rd and 4th sides. Dry runs are always helpful. Glue was added to the edges and once again secured with both brad nails and screws. You know, I often like to work on my driveway, soak in that sun or a gentle breeze. Today we had a gush of wind, but I prefer the outdoors. It's pretty easy to create a tabletop with sawhorses, 2x4s, leftover plywood, and clamps. As is often the case, things simmer and now there's a new discovery. Setting this up once again, we can add feet to our planter box by slightly raising the short piece of the side, almost an inch, and you will see how this dramatically changes the look of the planter. I pre-glued the medium pieces to speed up this process and rebuilt the entire planter. By raising it, some of the wood doesn't sit in water, say after a storm, and rot is partially minimized, but aesthetically I think it looks much better. When you're making several of these planters, it's a good idea to come up with a system. I find it useful to keep my cut pieces below the sawhorse within arm's reach. What do you guys think of this new look? Pretty cool, right? We're almost near the finish line. I added a mitered lip to clean up the top edges. This part was a little challenging, but I measured out 1.5 inches from the top of the edge of the planter. Then I marked off a 45-degree angle on each side with a handy-dandy speed square. This time I pulled out my sliding miter saw, secured on top. When thinking back to my first woodworking journey back when I was a teenager, I started with a miter box and after I became comfortable, I upgraded to a circular saw. My dad never invested in a miter saw, but it was a tool that I aspired to become familiar with after seeing it on a couple of woodworking shows on PBS. So right out of college, I purchased a miter saw to practice on. Anyway, we got the mitered lips cut and placed them on top with brad nails and screw. I didn't cut all the pieces at once. I measured and cut to avoid mistakes. This part is optional, but I wanted to add some dimensions, so I cut these strips down to size and placed them right inside. It's a detail that adds the right amount of character. We flipped our planters upside down and added bottom slats to keep the soil in. And sanded down the rough finish with a 120 grit sandpaper using an orbital sander. Fence pickets are naturally rough. Honestly, I could have sanded these boards down before starting this project or planed them down to remove the roughness. I had some leftover black exterior stain that I brushed onto this raised planter. I also had a natural stain for the other set of planters. Oh yeah, and we cannot forget the drain hole. I like to use a Forstner bit. I find it to be much cleaner than a spade.
Spring is the perfect time to plant lilies. I have 2 different varieties for 2 different planters. Until the next project, talk to you guys soon.